Well, it feels like I'm coming in late to this, even though we're like barely into January. It is January 5th as I am recording this right now, and it's just it's wonderful, you know. I've there's people who've recorded it in late December. There's some people who recorded it in early January. I even had a friend who recorded it in November, just to troll the audience, I guess. But anyway, I'm here now. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Britton here, also known as Some Okie Dude, and I am back with another video, and with a video I always look forward to during these times of the year, and that is, of course, the best books of 2025. These are the books that I read during the year of 2025 that impacted me, surprised me, even moved me at points. So yeah, this is my top 10 list of all the really great books that I read during the 2025 year. So yeah, I guess we should probably get to it, but yeah, let's go. So 2025 was a good year for me, I should say. It was a good year for me personally. I was very busy with a lot of books, ended up completing a lot of books, comics and whatnot. 2025 was a year that happened. There were a lot of ups and downs, if you will. A couple of stuff. I graduated from college, for one thing, so that was really good. Very proud of that achievement. I had a stream talking about it. It was a lot of fun. I also had, I also got a job. I have a job working at a radio station, which is a lot of fun. I've been doing that. Getting back into the swing of things right now. But I'm sure you guys don't really care about that. A lot of you are probably caring about, what I read during the year of 2025. And like I said, I had a pretty good year. It was interesting, though, because while I read a lot of really good books, I did manage to get 10 for this list, but I did read a lot of really good books. I didn't read a lot of great ones. There was not a 5-star read that I read this year, at least book-wise. That's never happened before. I don't think that's ever happened. It's gotten me kind of worried that maybe my critical standards are getting a bit too high for reading, but yeah, you know, it's just a lot of interesting reads this year. There were some reads I was looking forward to that weren't really up to snuff with my expectations. There were some books that were really good, but none that really crossed the line into that 5-star territory. But I did read a lot of really good books this year, so don't worry. I do have 10 books that will be done during this video. So yeah, I have 10. We should get to it. But before we get that, just a few things to note. As always, as I always do during these videos, I always note no rereads. These are all books that I read for the first time in the year of our Lord 2025. So no rereads. So sorry, True Grit, and sorry to The Time Machine, which I read again. Really enjoyed. I had a really good time with both of them, but not on the list. If I had read either of them for the first time, maybe, but not for rereads, unfortunately. So no rereads, as always. With comics, it's a little different. Hey guys, this is Editing Britain. This is how these things work, right? Anyway, I forgot to mention in the rules for the best books of 2025, I forgot to mention that I try not to repeat authors. Sometimes I'll make exceptions if the books are really that good, but I generally try to do one author per pick. So, yeah, not really much else to say on that. So, yeah, sorry I forgot to mention that. But speaking of comics, I read a lot of comics this year, a lot more than I thought I would. I put the challenge on myself to read more comics, and I definitely did. I read a good many. So instead of this video being like 2 hours long of me talking about all the comics and books I read during this year, I'm going to split off the comics video into its own video. So on Friday, you can look for the top 10 this Friday, you can look for the top 10 comics that I read this year. This video will be about the top 10 books with words, you know, prose books, that I read during the year. So yeah, that is basically all the, I believe that is all the check marks I have to get out of the way. So yes, this is only going to be about the books I read. I usually add comics because I don't usually read as many comics as I do books. But again, I read so many comics this year, it had to be split into its own video because, again, I don't think you guys want to sit here for 2 hours seeing me talk about books and comics that I love during the year. It's also more convenient for me because, believe it or not, even though it's just me sitting on my ass talking about books, it does take a lot of energy out of me. So, anyway, enough of that. Let's get to the actual video. But before we get to the actual list, you know what it is. A few honorable mentions. Yep, I got always the honorable mentions. There were a couple that almost got on this list. So, just to keep that in mind, there were a couple that almost got on this list. So, let's just name them off real quick. So, honorable mentions, we have If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. Dark Bloom by Molly McCobb. The Broken Sword by Paul Anderson. Lud in the Mist by Hope Mirrlees. Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. The Yiddish Policeman's Union by Michael Chabon. Train Dreams by Dennis Johnson. Spear by Nicola Griffith. All God's Children by Aaron Gwynn. Killer on the Road by Stephen Graham Jones. No, not the Elroy book, but don't worry, the Demon Dog will make an appearance on this list. Difficult Men by Brett Martin. River Sing Out by James Wade. Beneath the Jack-o'-lantern Sky by Tyler James, another friend of the channel. Sledge vs. the Labyrinth by Nick Horvath, also a pretty cool guy. The Sisters Brothers by Patrick DeWitt. And, of course, The Hybrid Helix. I read books 3 and 4 this year. Book 4, in particularly, was really, really good. By J.C.M. Byrne, Joe Byrne, good friend of the channel. So, with all that out of the way, I guess we should get into it. I thought it would take a little longer to get to the actual list. But, so yeah, honorable mentions, clap, do all that stuff. I'm not having special effects this time, so clap amongst yourselves. But, let's get to it. This is the best books that I read in 2025. Let me take a sip here. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so number 10 is one by, it's kind of funny because both of the top book at the end of this and this book are both indie reads by people I know off of BookTube. I was kind of going to put this on the honorable mentions because I felt like the rest of this book didn't quite live up to the remarkable first part of the book. But I realized that the first part of that book was so good, it was so gripping, I had to put it on this list. It just, I couldn't put it on here. I'm sure you guys are probably sick of hearing about it, but I had to give it its due. It's the only one I don't actually physically own, so there you go right there. And that is, of course, Discovery by J.J. Minton. Sorry for the real crappy quality on my phone. Really nice cover, though. I really enjoyed this book. So yeah, J.J. Minton, Discovery. Again, I can see the eye rolls. I know a lot of people are probably kind of annoyed that I picked this because a lot of people are picking it. But it's really good. It's really, really good. I really can't put into words why this book is my number 10. Well, I'll try. The Mittens and a bunch of other people have said that this book specifically is a bit hard to describe, and I can see why. It definitely busts a lot of genres. It dips its toes in a lot of genres, but really, if I could simplify it, I find Discovery's premise is actually quite simple, and that is, what if Cthulhu was real? And J.J. Minton take all of the dramatic possibilities that are probable with this premise and just milk it for all it's worth. This book is easily the most eccentric book I've read all year. There's a lot of really strange characters, lots of personality with the prose. Again, I feel like the rest of the book didn't quite have the oomph, the narrative drive of that first bit where it's just the people in the newsroom sitting around figuring out what's going on. But I do feel like that part of the book really made this book into what it is. And also just seeing the reactions of all the people who are dealing with the fact that this eldritch being is now amongst us. And what are we going to do now that we know that it exists? And, it's very much the Lovecraftian type of story. But instead of people just sitting around and angsting about our place in the universe, humanity actually kind of tries to do something about the fact that um, that Cthulhu exists, even though it's not really named Cthulhu. And don't worry, that's not. I don't think that's a spoiler. It's in like the first part. But this book is really, really good. It's really, I think what's hard to describe about it is like what actual genre it is. I mean, it's part science fiction, it's part cosmic fantasy, it's part horror, especially towards the beginning. But ultimately, it's a story about, well, discovery. And of course, the Mentons were very kind to lend me a e-arc early, before the book even came out. And I even had them on my channel to talk about it. I'll link the video down below if you guys want to see me talk about Discovery with them. It was a lot of fun. We do spoil the whole thing, so I wouldn't recommend going into it blind, because again, we do spoil the whole thing. But I do highly recommend picking up Discovery. It was a really good read. Again, I'm sure some of you are probably rolling your eyes because you've heard this a lot of other places, but I am being serious. Discovery is excellent. It is easily the most polished indie book that I have read since the Adan trilogy from Philip Chase, which is not something I give very highly. I don't. I generally don't. I didn't know if Philip would ever be topped or matched in terms of the polish of the Adan trilogy, but now I say now that Discovery gives him a run for his money. This is a very well-crafted, very eccentric novel that really kind of introduces kind of postmodern deconstruction as we know it into the indie sphere, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what happens next in the next book. I don't know what it's called. I think it's Constellations, if I remember correctly, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the next one. But yes, Discovery is an excellent book. I thought it was very, very good. I thought the first part was still the best, but the rest of it is very good too. If you are an attentive reader, you will pick up some references to other books and stories about, well, the Cthulhu mythos and cosmic horror and science fiction, all sorts of fun stuff. So yeah, Discovery is, it might be the most fun I had reading a book this year that isn't some of the other books that are on this list. But J.J. Minton were really on to something with this book. I really enjoyed reading it. And thank you to the Mentons for giving me the book. It's not why I added it on this list. I really do think it's a fantastic read. But Discovery is well worth the read, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. So number 10 is Discovery by J.J. Minton. Let's move on to the next book. Next book is actually one of the ones I had on my most anticipated reads of 2026. And this is one that took me about 4 months to read. I actually was accompanied, or not necessarily. I did use him to express my thoughts on the book. But this book is the author is a bit of a repeat from last year, and this was another one I was kind of hesitant to put on. But there was one moment in this book that just so overwhelmed me with just visceral feeling. I had to put it on this list, and that is, of course, A Brief History of Seven Killings by Marlon James. This one is hard to describe. I mean, really, what can I say about it that hasn't already been said? It's probably the densest novel that I read this year. Actually, no, that's not true. Book number 4 is the densest book that I read this year. But this is the second densest book that I read this year. This book is Marlon James's, I will say it is probably my least favorite of the Marlon James books that I've read thus far. But it's on this list, so that means it's still staggeringly good. This is Marlon James's story. This is Marlon James's take on the Bob Marley assassination attempt in 1976, where several gunmen entered his home, shot him, shot his wife in the head. Miraculously, they survived, if the report is correct. If he had exhaled when they had shot him in the chest where he was breathing, he would have been dead. Fortunately, he did not die. But Marlon James, in this book, talks about the basically he speculates on what happened to the men and women and other people who were involved in the shooting and how it all went down. This is a novel that is steeped in Jamaican history. It's not one I recommend lightly. It is probably the most dense book that Marlon James has written yet, and given that he has written the Dark Star trilogy, which is already pretty dense and elusive, that is saying something. But in many ways, this feels like a deeply personal work to Marlon James. It feels like Marlon James is coming to a reckoning with his home country of Jamaica. And all of the baggage that comes from such an endeavor. But A Brief History of Seven Killings kind of evades description. It's a crime novel on one hand, it's a spy novel on another, but it's also a deeply experimental novel that is very much like the Dark Star trilogy, told in a very oral stream of consciousness style. This has been compared to Cormac McCarthy and William Faulkner and Gabriel Garcia Marquez, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. But if there was one author I would give, I would compare this to. Again, I'm not going to bring up this guy too much, though he does have a book on this list. But that is James Ellroy. I actually think Ellroy is a much better comparison. This almost feels like Marlon James's take on the L.A. Quartet, where it's very dark, very bleak, very unapologetic about the violence and sex and the wildly strange characters that take over the novel, which is kind of like Discovery in that sense. It's kind of funny, though there's no speculative elements. But keep in mind, this is a very dark, bleak novel that does not hold back in terms of its violent content. There was one moment in this book that really put it on this list that was so visceral and so disturbing, it really had no peer, and it has some of the best of Marlon James's writing, even though it does sometimes spin its wheels. This is a profoundly messy book, but I do think there is a charm in its messiness. It won the Man Booker Prize for a reason. It's a book where everything is really on the table. It's really Marlon James's meditation on Jamaica and the constant violence and cycles of violence that are often perpetrated on people, and then people perpetrate it on each other. Not really much else to say about this novel, but there is a slight glimmer of hope. That even though the singer has died, the Bob Marley is never actually named. He is only called the singer in the story. But there is the sense by the end of the book that even though he has died, and even though there is still violence in Jamaica, that the good legacy that Bob Marley has left will still move on. It will still carry on, while the evil and degradation and cynicism of the people who tried to kill him will all fade away, as they will be replaced by other evil, disgusting people. This definitely has one of the nastiest villains that I've seen in recent years, with the character of Josie Wales, who is very much a character made by his environment, but I was just so disgusted by him, to the point where I couldn't just go like, yes, he is a product of his environment, but at the same time, he is truly, and I don't want to say purely, because I don't know if pure evil truly exists, but there are moments in this book where he really dips the line into pure, unadulterated evil. And Marlon James does not hold back when depicting these characters being vicious towards each other. A Brief History of Seven Killings, though, is a remarkable book. I've talked about it enough, but it won the Man Booker Prize for a reason. It's an excellent book, and Marlon James, once again, is probably one of the most ambitious and staggering writers still living today. Still really itching at the bone for book 3 of the Dark Star trilogy. I really have to see I gotta see which perspective is next. I gotta see how this trilogy wraps up. Looking forward to it. But yes, A Brief History of Seven Killings is my number 9. Number 8 is a much slimmer beast, far more controlled, and that book is another. It was a winter read. for good reason, because it takes place in the cold. But that is The North Water by Ian McGuire. This book, I read this on the recommendation of the guy who wrote All God's Children, Aaron Gwynn, who's an acquaintance of mine. I talk to him on Twitter from time to time, big McCarthy fan, and he said if there's a book that kind of scratches that itch a bit, that is The North Water, and boy was he right. This book is a meticulously crafted, endlessly propulsive narrative about what I like to call the duality of man, if you want to call it that. Basically what I mean by that is good versus evil, savagery versus reason, all that fun stuff. And also, like many of my favorite books, and I'll put it this way, as you guys know, one of my favorite themes is the violence and degradation and depravity that lives within every single person, and how being out of civilization or our comfort zone really brings out the monstrousness in some people. I mentioned how I mentioned that Josie Wales is one of the nastiest villains that I've read this year. Henry Drax, the main antagonist of this novel, is one of the scariest antagonists that I've encountered in some time. He is a creature of pure impulse. He doesn't really think about what he does. There are several moments where we're actually inside of his head, and we really get to see the depravity that lives within, and how he doesn't really think about what he does. He just does things. And he generally looks down on people who are, as he calls, thinkers and not doers. But ultimately, we see that kind of invert as we see the main character of this story, a guy called Sumner, who is a former medic who got into a really bad political situation and has been disgraced from the army. We end up figuring out the levels of his violence and how far he's willing to go, and if he will hold on to his humanity. It's also just a really damn riveting narrative with a lot of really great plot twists, and also some pretty superb characterization throughout. It is not as meandering as you would expect from a McCarthy novel, but it does have that quite biblical language and drive and propulsiveness that is among the best of his work, and The North Water does seem like something he would have written back in the day. Or if you're someone who is constantly frustrated by Moby Dick, like I am, this book is a far more approachable beast, and you can definitely see this being inspired by Moby Dick. Sorry, I got mixed up there. It's almost like if Joseph Conrad wrote Moby Dick, if I could put it in the Hollywood pitch terms. I don't really like that, but what are you going to do? But The North Water is an excellent book, a really good read to read during this time of year when it's super cold, because this book is absolutely frigid. It is cold. You feel the frost on these characters, and again, Ian McGuire does not hold back when discussing the depravity of human beings and what they are capable of doing to each other in the right context. This book, I don't know if it joins the sublime horror of such books as Heart of Darkness or Blood Meridian, for that matter, but I do think this book is a nice complement to those two great reads. Highly recommend The North Water. It's an excellent book. If you're a fan of historical fiction, even, it's really, really good stuff. Highly recommend it. I'm going to put it down now. That's good. Okay, so moving on to the next book. This is going into the crime fiction segment, if you will. I read a good amount of crime fiction, though I am reading a lot more this year, so these books actually inspired me to really double down on reading more crime fiction this year. But number 7 is, it almost was the best crime novel of the year, except for the other two that were just better. And that is All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. S.A. Cosby, once again, is remarkably good. He's just a really, really good writer. And while I find that Razorblade Tears is my favorite of his books, I have to just put it, All the Sinners Bleed is easily his best and his most refined novel to date. It's his most thematically resonant book. It's his most, it's probably his most political and angry book as well, without coming off as preachy to the audience. Though there were some moments where I wish there was a little more introspection, but This book is really, really good, and if you're a fan of stuff like Mindhunter or Red Dragon or even True Detective, this book will um will scratch that itch for you. And it's also one of the most visceral novels that I've read during the year, especially in terms of emotion. There are some, aside from A Brief History of Seven Killings, that is. It's also just a really great, really well-constructed crime thriller with a really compelling protagonist that is Titus Crown, the troubled and haunted sheriff of this town in Virginia. But this novel really viciously interrogates such themes as religious trauma and the scars of America's past and how they haunt the present. And for a novel that is very much a propulsive crime thriller, this is really a book about America. It's easily the most politically relevant novel that I've read this year. Really great, great story, really great characters. S.A. Cosby has solidified his place as easily one of the best crime writers who lives today that isn't Dennis Lehane or, well, some of the other people. Actually, Dennis Lehane does make an appearance on this list, so I've kind of spoiled that, but sorry about that. But also, I have to say, this book also explores how, as much as we like to think we've gotten better, it does seem like we've gotten better at staying the same. It's just a really great book, very visceral book. It is not a book if you are easily triggered by things like child abuse or murder or mutilation. But this book is just absolutely magnificent. It also has my personal favorite line of the year, which is sometimes love, sometimes grief is love unexpressed. Other times, it's regret made flesh. This book, All the Sinners Bleed, it is easily S.A. Cosby's best novel. I don't know if it's my favorite of his novel. Probably my second favorite now that I've thought about it. But it's one that stuck with me as much as Razorblade Tears did. But Razorblade Tears is still my personal favorite. But if we're talking about the best thing that he has done thus far, All the Sinners Bleed stands alone. It is just, it's fantastic. Like I said, it's a phenomenal book, his most refined novel to date, and his most controlled novel to date. Just a really magnificent book, and really shows how crime fiction can be literature. It really can be. I mean, I guess it technically is literature. I mean, it's in the same bookstores as everyone else. But this really shows the power of crime fiction at its best. Just an absolutely magnificent novel all the way through. S.A. Cosby has already solidified himself as one of the best crime writers living today. Really, really good stuff. Moving on to the next one. Next one is another crime novel. That wasn't really that wasn't really intentional, but that just kind of worked out. And I mentioned him earlier. In the honorable mentions pick, and I read this book because I'm actually catching up on this series. I actually just mentioned this series, funnily enough, because when I was talking about A Brief History of Seven Killings. That is the LA Quartet, and the book I'm talking about is The Big Nowhere by James Ellroy. Yes, I read this for the first time this year. I'm actually slowly catching up on the LA Quartet, but The Big Nowhere, I put The Black Dahlia in the honorable mentions list last year, but this book is just 10 times better. It's better paced, it's much more controlled. I also think it's a better story. It has more compelling characters, and we really get to see Ellroy's more unique voice come out while still telling a relatively straightforward crime thriller. But he does manage to extend his reach a lot more. But The Big Nowhere is really where James Ellroy begins to get comfortable in the seat of becoming the demon dog of crime literature, with compelling characters, brutal violence. I mean, very brutal violence. But also, there's a tenderness to this book as well. I think Danny Upshaw has gotten up there as one of the most tragic characters that James Ellroy has come up with. He's very much like Ed Exley, just just a bit more impulsive, and he doesn't quite have Ed Exley's calculating mind. And unfortunately, it is that impulsiveness that brings him to his end. I won't spoil exactly what happens, but you know how James Ellroy's story, if you're familiar with James Ellroy's stories, he is not a guy who shies away from punishing his characters. And it's also remarkable that as old as this book is, this was written in, I think, 87 or 88, this book is surprisingly very sensitive to the plight of homosexual men during this time. We really get to see that with Danny Upshaw as he slowly begins to unravel. Also, the character of Buzz Meeks, Turner Meeks, is also a very compelling character, and we really get to see a lot of the tropes and ideas that James Ellroy would play with again and again, such as the three main characters who do a lot of bad things to enforce order. Though I don't know if the three in this book are quite as good as the sublime L.A. Confidential, but I can definitely see the language coming that would go on in L.A. Confidential really comes from this book. He really builds that story, and he really creates a great narrative from this so far. But going back to Buzz Meeks, I really like Buzz Meeks. He's a great character, not just because he's from Oklahoma, though that definitely helps. But I am kind of a sucker for the criminal with a code type of character, and Ellroy plays with that trope in a very interesting way, as we see Buzz really come to terms with his own limitations. And it does kind of make me sad thinking about the movie, because in the L.A. Confidential film, he kind of is a throwaway character who's kind of a mook for the main bad guys. In this, he gets a very complicated backstory of his own. And we get to see his own morals and scruples, even though he is kind of a sleazebag. But yes, The Big Nowhere is an excellent book. It is one of Ellroy's most controlled books to date. It's probably his most disciplined book, while still keeping his signature demon dog imagination. And there's also some really fantastic moments of jazz music in this. Being played and how people react to it. That is up there with some of the best. Really great music scenes in this. And of course, we meet the ferocious Dudley Smith, who is the main antagonist of the quartet moving forward. And yeah, he is terrifying. And ironically, Ellroy doesn't like Cormac McCarthy, but I do find that their works are quite similar. And with Ellroy, I find that Dudley Smith is his version of the Judge, though far less restrained, and far less of an Old Testament prophet than the Judge. But Dudley Smith has that same corruptive touch that the Judge has, and destroys anything ruthlessly that gets in his way. The Big Nowhere is a fantastic book. It's a major step up from the Black Dahlia, and of course leads quite nicely into what I think is the best of the quartet, and one of the best crime novels ever written, and that is L.A. Confidential. But The Big Nowhere is great. It's really, really good. Highly recommended as well. So, yeah. Moving on. We're now getting into the top 5. We're really getting into the heavy hitters. And this one was one that people have been telling me to get to for years. I started a whole series about this on my channel because, you know, I couldn't resist. I got Derry and my friend Raph and Derry were big fans of this series to come on this. And let me just get a drink real quick. But you guys probably know what it is. It is really the series that was kind of the big breakout for me this year. And it's one that really it's one of the ones that caught me by surprise. And that is Discworld, the City Watch sub-series in particular, by Terry Pratchett. Sir Terry Pratchett, I should give him his due. I only have Guards here, but I read Guards and Men at Arms, which is up there. I didn't want to grab both books. But Discworld is really good. Is it Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? No. But Terry Pratchett is a much different beast, though he does have that penchant for absurdism that one Douglas Adams had as well. But these books, I decided to get into them because, one, I like crime novels, as you can see from the last two picks, and it felt, and from what people told me, it's the most approachable. It's the most fully baked of the, or it's one of the most fully baked. There's a couple of the early ones that where Terry hadn't quite figured it out yet, but a lot of people told me that Guards is the best place to start for newbies. So I took that advice. I read it, and despite my skepticism, I was won over. These characters are really great. The storytelling's really great. Really assured prose, too. I was very surprised by how competent a prose stylist, not only competent, but really good prose stylist that Terry Pratchett is. He can really sling a phrase, and he's also really good at creating compelling characters who, yes, are quite bumbling. Yes, they can be quite foolish, but there's a lot of heart with these characters. There's a lot of soul, if you will, with these characters that you wouldn't quite expect the first time around. And Commander now, Samuel Vimes is easily becoming one of my favorite fantasy characters of all time. He is just a magnificent character. He's just great, and he is, in my opinion, a true hero. He's not even an anti-hero, even though he is a grumpy bastard. The man is a true capital H hero. Just read Men-at-Arms, and if you are not pumping your fist in the air as I was when you show just how much of a good person that he is, I wouldn't believe you. You're just lying at this point. But these books are really funny, yes. But they're also remarkably intelligent, really frank about issues in society. But there is a softness in Pratchett that I don't think exists in something like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There is a hope in this series that you won't find in Hitchhikers. And while I still like Hitchhikers a lot more, Discworld really impressed me with the scope of its world building. How did I almost forget to mention the world building? The world building in this is magnificent. The city of Ankh-Morpork is as much of a established setting. It is as much of a remarkable setting as some of the best in fantasy, up there with Bazlag, Middle-earth, and even Lankmar, for that matter. But I'm only 2 books in, so I can't say it's one of the best settings I've read in fantasy, but the world building this is remarkably assured, and there is a refreshing lack of world building. It's a magnificent book all the way, or this is a magnificent series so far. Really liked the direction that Terry Pratchett has taken this, and while I liked Guards more than I liked Men-at-Arms, both of them have their moments. I really, personally, I quite like Vimes, and I was a bit disappointed at Men-at-Arms that Vimes didn't appear quite as much, though he does get a real good part. He does get a lot of really good parts in the end. But I am in love. I am now on the Discworld train. There will be more episodes of the Discworld Files coming in 2026. I hope, I assure you of that. If I will have Derry hold me to it. So, and thank you to Derry and Raph for dealing with my questions and spending a few hours with me as I talk about these excellent books. And yes, they are very good palate cleansers, much like Hybrid Helix. They're really good ones to read after you've read something heavy. But that does not mean they're shallow. They're really just a lot of fun, and they're also really intelligent as well. And also, yes, they're quite funny. Quite funny. I was busting out laughing a few times, I will say. But The City Watch by Sir Terry Pratchett is remarkably good and really quite touching. Unexpectedly so. You will be touched a few times in the readings of these books. And of course, again, Commander Samuel Vimes is just the best. I love Samuel Vimes. He is just a remarkably great character. And I really enjoyed reading these books. They're enjoyable. They're really fun. While also being really intelligent and with a really close attention to character. I really don't know what else to say. It's really good. I do like Guards more. I do think it comes together quite nicely. Though Men-at-Arms comes quite together nicely as well. And I do think it does get a little convoluted, Men-at-Arms. I like Guards more. But Both of them are well worth the read, and I am very much looking forward to reading more of this series in 2026. Hopefully it will make an appearance on this list again when I get around to that in 2026, whenever that'll be. But, yes, remarkably good. Sir Terry Pratchett has won me over. Damn it. Just, you bastard. You got me. All right, anyway. But, yes, number 5 is The City Watch by Sir Terry Pratchett. They're really good. You should go read them if you haven't already. And I'm sure a lot of the Discworld fans who harassed me mercilessly into reading Discworld finally are probably jumping up and down in celebration. Looking at you, Derry. But anyway, let's actually move on to the next book. And this is... this was my number 1 on my most anticipated books of 2025. I was going to read all 3 of these books, but I realized just from how dense this damn thing was, that was just an impossibility. That was not going to happen. Even though I loved the previous pick, I really enjoyed the City Watch books. And in any other context, it would be the best fantasy book that I read during the year. This book was so remarkable, so original, so stark in its vision. I had to put it above The City Watch. And I love The City Watch. I did. I really did. You just saw me gush for like 5 minutes about how great those books are. But this one, I do find that one was still pretty steeped in fantasy convention while flouting it often. Or is it flaunting? I don't know. But anyway, the book I have for number 4 is probably the most original and daring book that I've read this year. Last year, I should say. And that is Titus Groan by Mervyn Peake. And before you guys are like, holy shit, that's a huge book, these are the 3 Gormenghast novels in one volume. It's not the one. I always mention this because I don't want people to get confused. So, yeah, I read that. Those pages right there, that's Titus Groan. Titus Groan, this book is the most dense book that I read this year. Brief History of 7 Killings was pretty close, but nothing surpasses the linguistic artistry that is of Gormenghast, of Titus Groan, Mervyn Peake, if you will. This book is, how do I even describe it? It's quite simple, actually. It's about these people who live in this castle. It's considered a fantasy because it is taking place in a secondary world, but the magic is very downplayed. There is a hint that there might be something magical going on, but it's generally very downplayed. A lot of the fantasticalness that comes from this book really comes from the strange personalities, the strange setting of Gormenghast, which I have to say, Castle Gormenghast, I was hesitant to say that Ankh-Morpork was as good of a setting as Bazlag or Middle-earth or Westeros. Gormenghast, in one book, Mervyn Peake makes Castle Gormenghast into one of the great settings in all of fantasy, with its remarkably well-crafted, it is remarkably and lovingly crafted as much as Bazlag was. The detail came very close to Bazlag at points, but that does not mean it is shallow. The characters are odd, but there's also a surprising amount of empathy and heart to these characters that you wouldn't expect initially. My favorite character, of course, was Steerpike, because really, even though the book is called Titus Groan, the book is about Titus Groan the baby, it's really Steerpike's story and how he navigates his way into becoming one of the head honchos of Castle Gormenghast, and all of the manipulativeness he has to use in order to get ahead. And he goes to some less than scrupulous means to getting ahead, we'll just say. But this is a remarkably crafted novel, and really I find that the best part of this book is easily the prose styling of Mervyn Peake. The man was a stylist, and the detail in this book is so vivid. The man was a painter, he was an illustrator, and if you could see, there are actually some of his own illustrations, at least in my copy. I don't know if it's in everyone else's. there are some of his illustrations, and you can really see that discipline that he had as an illustrator really come through with the descriptions. Like, some of the prose in this was so remarkable, so beautiful. I had to put this book down a few times and just sit with it. This is not a book to easily rush through. It is not digestible by any means. It is a book you have to sit with. It is a book you have to digest slowly. It's a book that you have to just think about. And if you don't believe me, let me just read a passage from this book. From Assemblage, page 82 of my copy. First to arrive was the outsider, the commoner, who, through his service to the family, was honored by a certain artificial equality of status, liable at any moment to be undermined. Dr. Prunasqualler. He entered fluttering his perfect hands and, mincing to the table, rubbed them together at the level of his chin in a quick, animated way as his eyes traveled over the spread that lay before him. My very dear Swelter, I may offer you my congratulations, as a doctor knows something of the stomachs, my dear Swelter, something indeed of stomachs, not only stomachs, but of palates, of tongues, and of membranes, my dear man, that covers the roofs of the mouth, and not only of the membrane that covers the roof of the mouth, but of the sensitized nerve endings, I can positively assure you, are tingling, my dear and very excellent Swelter, at the very thought of coming into contact with these delicious-looking oddments that you've no doubt tossed off at an odd moment. Very, very likely, I should say. Oh, yes, very, very likely. Dr. Prunasqualler smiled and exhibited 2 brand-new rows of gravestones between his lips, and darting his beautiful white hands forward with the little finger crooked to a right angle. He lifted a small emerald cake with a blob of cream atop of it, as neatly off the top of a plate of such trifles as though he were at home in his dissecting room and were removing some organ from a frog. But before he got it to his mouth, a hissing note stopped him short. It came from Sour Dust, and it caused the doctor to replace the green cake on the top of the pile even more swiftly than he had removed it. He had forgotten for the moment, or at least pretended to forget, what a stickler for etiquette old Sour Dust was, until the Countess herself was in the room. No eating could begin. Very, very good. And there's stuff like that all over. That's not even like some of the most beautiful passages in this book. Like, there are some passages where Peake just describes the scenery, and it is just some of the best parts of this book. And for that reason alone, Titus Groan is my number 4. It is easily the best fantasy novel that I read this year. It is remarkably original. Even though it is pulling from the Gothic tradition of fiction. Mervyn Peake takes it and makes it into his own. The man was a true stylist, and I could definitely see why so many people really like this series as much as they love Lord of the Rings, or some who don't like Lord of the Rings. You know who you are. You definitely know. You definitely know who you are. Anyway, so moving on. This is number 4, Titus Groan. Excellent book. And moving on. So let's get to it. Number 3, we're really getting to the top ones now. It's actually one by one of my favorite authors. I actually finished the trilogy of his I started all the way back in 2024. It's wild how fast time flies. But that book is Cities of the Plain by Cormac McCarthy, which is the last book in his Border trilogy. I thought The Crossing was one of the saddest things that McCarthy ever wrote. No, sir. Cities of the Plain was like, hold my beer. This book is devastating. Even though this is definitely lighter and more lighthearted and funny than some of his other works, I would definitely say it goes on the Suttree end sometimes in terms of its humor. The dramatic shift it takes towards the end of the book is absolutely devastating. The last 80 pages of Cities on the Plain are some of the best work that Cormac McCarthy has ever done. And Billy Parham is definitely up there with one of the most tragic characters in all of American literature. And my heart was just my emotions were soaring for this character as the story moved on. Those last 80 pages are just brutal, and some of the most tragic bits that McCarthy has ever done, as Billy Parham is condemned to a life of solitude. I won't dare say what happens to him, but man, if you thought The Crossing was bad, well, I still think The Crossing was a lot worse, but Cities of the Plain is just as devastating. It's right up there. The last 80 pages are just really, really sad, and it really leaves on a bittersweet note as we really get to see where Billy goes. There's also some mystical stuff that McCarthy does, not quite up there with Blood Meridian, but not quite up there with The Crossing in terms of the mysticism, but it is quite strange at points, and it's just really, really sad. It's also one of the most controlled books that McCarthy has ever done. It's just a really good, it's really sums up what the trilogy is about in one book, a really nice lamentation on how the modern age is encroaching upon our protagonist. The Old West is dying, and there's nothing our characters can do to fight the modern world. And it has never been expressed more clearly than in Cities of the Plain. Some of Cormac McCarthy's finest work, which is a high thing to drop, or is a high thing to top. But man, remarkably good. And of course, Billy Parham is one of the saddest characters in all of American literature. Poor bastard. Really feel bad for the guy. Moving on to the top two. Let's get to it. I'm going to try to get through this quickly because we're approaching pretty quickly an hour. But yes, my next book, number 2, is from one of my favorite authors. One of my favorite crime authors, even. I actually just finished this in December, and it almost took the number 1 spot. There were moments of this book where it almost took the 1 spot. This guy, I'm gonna give it away. It's Dennis Lehane. He almost did it again. He did it again with his so-called swan song. At least for right now. I don't want to spread fake news, but with his so-called swan song. Yes, I am talking about Small Mercies by Dennis Lehane. This book is the best crime novel I read during 2025, and I thought The Big Nowhere was going to take it because The Big Nowhere was awesome, and also All the Sinners Bleed was great. But this book right here, blew me the fuck away. It blew me the fuck away. I'll just say it. He blew me the fuck away. Like, this book is Dennis Lehane hitting all cylinders. I know that Since We Fell is considered one of his weakest books, and maybe that kind of jittered him a little bit, and he went to TV for a while, but he came back 2023 and decided to give us Small Mercies, and Small Mercies is Lehane's take on a story that would generally make me quite irritable. It would generally get me to roll my eyes. It's about the tried and true topic of racism in America. It's a story about a woman who comes to terms with her own prejudice. It's an old story that is as old as time, but instead of proselytizing, I probably butchered that word, instead of preaching to the choir, instead of just barreling on about how bad racism is, Dennis Lehane quite brilliantly instead decides to show the consequences of living in a racist society, and he makes you feel all of those consequences as the story moves along. We don't really get he doesn't even have to tell us that racism is bad. We only get to see the consequences of what it's like to live in a racist society, and the hypocrisy and hollowness of neighborhoods that claim to be together, that claim to be all together, that claim to be, watching each other's backs, but will throw you to the wolves if you dare question their way of life. Brilliantly done. And the only reason this wasn't number 1 is because it does end on a rather predictable note. It does become a revenge story, so what are you going to do? But this book is Dennis Lehane firing on all cylinders. It is not quite up to the quality of Mystic River or even Darkness Take My Hand, but it does come close. It does come close. It does peak on that Mystic River energy. It is as tragic as Mystic River at times. With his sheer emotionality. But I have to give it, it's a great book on its own. And if this is his last book, I hope to God that it isn't. And I don't know if he can stay away, honestly. But I hope to God this isn't. But if it is, a hell of a book to end on. Small Mercies is Dennis Lehane at his best, and with a very stripped back style that you don't usually see, that he probably learned from his time as a screenwriter. This book is great. No notes. Just really no notes whatsoever. And now we are here. We are here, guys. We are here at number one. Number one. What could number one be? You got James Ellroy. You got Mervyn Peake. Hell, you got A Brief History, 7 Killings. What could possibly top all of those books? It'll surprise you. You might not like it. Well, someone's going to like it, and it's the person who wrote this, because, I know them. But it's going to surprise you. You might not even like the pick. You might even go, really? That book? Yes, really, that book. Let me just take a sip, because my throat's getting dry as hell. Oh, okay. Okay, so what's my number one read of the year? Again, you're not going to like it. You're probably not going to like this. You're probably going to get surprised even. I'm going to stop teasing. It's Phased by Victoria Tekken. You might have heard of her. She's also known as Tori. She runs a channel on BookTube called Tori Talks. It's a very good channel. You should go check it out. Very kind person as well. She was very kind to sit with me and talk about this book when I pestered her with questions. But Phased came out of nowhere. It really did. I was going to read it in 2024 for Halloween because, it seemed kind of horror-tinged. It's about werewolves. But I didn't get around to it because I got really busy with some other stuff. I went on a trip in October, so that really kind of dampened things, even though I had fun on the trip. But I ended up reading, picking this up around April. I had been reading a couple of indie books. I read Dark Bloom, which I mentioned earlier. But I ended up picking up Phased because I like werewolves, and I thought it would be good. And I also wanted to give Tori some support because, she needs it. But this book just completely caught me by surprise in a way that doesn't happen. It's the rare book that is the most pleasant sort of feeling. It is when a book just completely catches you off guard. And that's exactly what Phased did. This book is not just about werewolves. That's only part of the point. It is a raw and intense and very unapologetic look into systematic abuse and trauma and how ultimately we can overcome trauma through connecting with other people. Which is a message that not only needs to be told, but not the type of thing I was expecting in this type of book. It's a YA book. It's about a bunch of teenagers going to high school. There's a lot of angst. I was kind of expecting that, but I wasn't expecting the raw emotionality that I got from this story. And there's one thing that Tori is brilliant at throughout this book. It is the way that she candidly and without fear describes the raw, no kidding around feelings of trauma that I have not seen since perhaps James Ellroy, or even Marlon James, for that matter. I think she matches them at this point, or even Stephen King, if that matter. Just in terms of just raw emotionality, I have to give it to Tori. She really is remarkably good at it. And the way she got me to care for these characters despite myself is, again, remarkable. Just utterly remarkable. I wasn't expecting it. This is also just a really controlled, really remarkably well-crafted book. There's nary a misstep in here. I thought, aside from the ending being a little predictable, that's it. That's the only thing that I thought was kind of a quibble with this. But Phased is it's a miracle. that might be a bit hyperbolic. It's a remarkable book because, again, it just took me completely off guard. I didn't know what to expect from it. But once I was taken into its embrace, it never let me go. That's all I'll say. That's all I really say. Phased is not just a book about werewolves. but it's a book about trauma and how through connecting with other people, how through being with people and opening up to people and opening up your heart for others can heal anything. I think that's a beautiful message. I think that's something we need to hear. And I am very much looking forward to anything else that Tori does, especially a sequel of this. I would love to see a sequel of this because there were some cliffhangers, but yeah, Phased was my number one pick of the year. I know, I can hear it now. I can hear some of you going like, "What? Like that book?" Yes, read it. Just read it. That's all I got to say. Just read the book, have a go at it. You will not regret the time you spent. You will not regret the time that you spent with it. So, yeah. Anyway, getting on the cusp of an hour. I didn't know I was going on that long. But anyway, so that is my top 10 books of the year. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Top 10 comics will be out on Friday. This is coming out on Wednesday. You guys know where to find me. Social media, Twitter, Letterboxd, Goodreads, right more reviews that are probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. You can also find me on Instagram and Blue Sky, getting the hang of it. I love doing these each year, and hopefully you guys tell me what some of your favorite books were in the comment section. And as always, like, comment, subscribe. As my buddy John Minton likes to say, it feels good when you do it. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed my picks. Let me know what your picks were for the best books of the year. It's not really much else for me to say, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and until next time, see you guys later. Bye-bye.